You know that feeling when someone invites you somewhere and your first internal response isn't excitement, it's a quiet calculation of how much energy it's going to cost you, not because you don't like the person, not because the place sounds terrible, but because there's this immediate, almost physical sense of what leaving your space will require from you. And maybe you've noticed that other people don't seem to do this math the same way. They just say yes. They just go. And that difference has probably made you wonder, more than once, if something about you is off. There's something about home that feels different to you than it does to other people. It's not laziness, even though you've probably heard that word thrown at you more times than you can count. It's not antisocial behavior, even though the world loves to use that label for anyone who doesn't constantly seek out group settings. It's something else entirely, something quieter, something that only makes sense when you stop trying to judge it and start trying to understand it on its own terms. Home isn't just a location for you. It's a state of being where you can fully exhale, where the performance stops, where you don't have to manage anyone's perception of you or adjust your energy to match the room or decode social cues that other people seem to read effortlessly. And when you're home, there's this restoration that happens, not just physical rest, but a kind of psychological reset that you actually need in order to function. Without it, everything starts to feel harder, louder, more demanding than it objectively is, even if nothing externally changed. Think about what happens to you in social situations, even ones you choose, even ones with people you genuinely like. There's a part of you that's always aware of how you're coming across. Are you talking too much? Not enough? Did that joke land? Are you being interesting? Are you being too quiet and now someone's going to ask if you're okay? And that awareness doesn't turn off just because you're having a good time. It runs in the background, constantly adjusting, constantly monitoring. Other people don't seem to carry this layer of self-observation, or if they do, it doesn't drain them the way it drains you. So home becomes the place where that monitoring system can finally power down, where you don't have to be anything for anyone, where the most natural version of yourself is allowed to exist without explanation or adjustment. And over time, you've learned that this isn't just a preference, it's actually essential. You've learned that pushing yourself to be out in the world constantly, the way you're told you should be, comes with a cost that other people don't seem to pay, or even notice. Maybe you've noticed that your best ideas come to you when you're alone, that your mind works differently when there's no one else's energy in the room, that you process your emotions more clearly, understand your own thoughts more fully when you have space and silence around you. This isn't avoidance. This is how you function best. But somewhere along the way, you absorb the message that this is wrong, that healthy people want to be out, around others, constantly engaged with the external world, and so you've probably spent years trying to override what you instinctively knew about yourself. There's also something about control that matters here, though that word probably sounds harsher than what you actually experience. At home, you control the variables, the noise level, the lighting, who's there and when, the pace of everything. And when you're someone whose nervous system is more sensitive to stimulation than average, that control isn't a luxury. It's a necessity. Out in the world, you're constantly adapting to environments that weren't designed with your particular nervous system in mind. And that adaptation is exhausting in a way that's hard to explain to people who don't experience it. You might have noticed that you can enjoy being out for a while, but there's always this clock running in your head, this quiet awareness of when you're going to hit your limit. And you've learned to dread that moment when you're not home yet, but you desperately need to be. When staying becomes actively uncomfortable, but leaving feels socially complicated. You've sat through countless situations where you were technically fine, but internally you were already done. Already needing to be back in your own space, processing everything that just happened, letting your system recalibrate. And here's what's interesting and important. The people closest to you have probably told you that you're missing out, that you need to push yourself more, that life is out there, not in here. And maybe part of you has believed them. Maybe you've tried to be the person who says yes to everything, who stays out late, who thrives on constant social interaction. But it never quite sticks, does it? Because it requires you to operate in a way that isn't sustainable for you. You're not avoiding life by being home. You're creating the conditions where you can actually engage with life without losing yourself in the process. Think about the relationships that actually work for you. They're probably with people who understand that your affection isn't measured by your physical presence. People who don't take it personally when you need space. People who've learned that you're not withdrawing from them. You're maintaining yourself so you can show up meaningfully when you do engage. But you've also probably lost relationships because of this. because someone needed more than you could give, because they interpreted your need for solitude as rejection, because they couldn't understand that your love language includes significant amounts of alone time. There's a version of yourself that exists only at home, the version that doesn't edit your thoughts before speaking them aloud to yourself, that moves through space without consciousness of being watched, that follows your own rhythms without accommodating anyone else's timeline or energy. And that version isn't less real than the one other people see. It's actually more real. It's the foundation that the public version is built on. Without time with that foundational self, the public version starts to feel hollow, performative, disconnected from who you actually are. You've probably also noticed that your need for home increases when you're stressed, anxious, or going through something difficult. When other people might seek out friends or distraction, you need to retreat. You need to be somewhere familiar where you can process without having to simultaneously manage how you're being perceived while you process. This isn't avoidance coping, though again, you've probably been told it is. This is actually a sophisticated form of self-regulation. You've learned what you need in order to work through difficult things, and you honor that instead of forcing yourself to cope in ways that don't serve you. But there's something else happening too. Something about safety. Not physical safety necessarily, but psychological safety. The world requires so much from you. Requires you to be on, to be available, to be responsive, to be appropriate. And you can do all of that. You have done all of that. But there's a part of you that never fully relaxes when you're doing it. A part that's always aware that you're in a space where you have to modulate yourself, where mistakes have social consequences, where you can't fully let down your guard. Home is where that guard can finally drop. Sometimes you wonder if you're missing something fundamental about being human. If other people have access to some kind of energy source or social ease that you just don't possess. And maybe you've tried to fix this about yourself. Tried to become more extroverted, more spontaneous, more comfortable with constant stimulation. But every attempt to fundamentally change this aspect of yourself has probably ended the same way, with you exhausted and wondering why you can't just be different. What if you're not supposed to be different? What if the way you're built is actually a legitimate way to be built? Not better or worse than people who thrive on constant external engagement, just different. Requiring different conditions to flourish, drawing energy from different sources, finding meaning through different pathways. This is the sentence most people never hear, but desperately need. You're not broken because you love staying home. You're someone whose nervous system processes the world deeply, who needs significant amounts of internal space to function well, and who's learned that honoring that need isn't selfish, it's necessary. The psychological reason you love staying home is that it's where you can actually be yourself without cost, where the energy you generate is yours to keep instead of constantly being spent on adaptation and performance, where you can exist in your most natural state without apology or explanation. And maybe understanding that doesn't change anything practical about your life. You'll probably still feel pressure to be more social, still have to explain yourself to people who don't get it, still wonder sometimes if you're doing it wrong. But at least now you know. This isn't pathology. This is temperament. This is wiring. This is just how you're made. And there's nothing about you that needs fixing. If this resonated with you, I'd love to know. So, leave a comment sharing your experience, or just let me know you were here. And if you found this valuable, consider subscribing so we can keep having these conversations. Sometimes the most important thing is just knowing you're not the only one. See you next time.